But the one question they kept coming up with in the book, where there's a female called Jenny who was kidnapped,
Mm-hmm.
and the central character gets her out and gets her home. And they all asked, did that lady become my first wife?
Can you talk about how you did that and what sort of the key lessons were that you learned?
Yeah, I think my wife and I often talked about if I died first or she died first, what we would do. And we both agreed that whoever was left, we wanted them to be happy.
Yeah.
Um, and I think for 6 months or more after my wife died, I was in probably the deepest pit of despair that I'd ever known. An army, so called, and their offshoots of the provisional IRA, they didn't really care who they killed.
Yeah.
I mean, if you were a Catholic family, and this happened a lot in the state, and you stood up against them,
Mm-hmm.
There'll be a dark night, armed men would come to your door and just take your wife or you off to some dark wood and kill you. I mean, you can take it from one extreme where you might be standing with 6 other guys and told to stop people coming out through a road junction,
Mm-hmm.
and you're confronted with 400 or 500 people, mostly young men, first of all throwing rocks, then petrol bombs, then what we called nail bombs, which was plastic explosive with 6-inch nails strapped around it.
Mm-hmm. Did you know there's a technology that's actually an app on your phone that uses sound waves to tell your brain what you want your brain to do? We had a young man that was on a guest on our podcast, the Mike Litton Experience, who had a traumatic brain injury. He was sleeping 3 hours a night. He's using NuCalm now and he's sleeping more. Go to NuCalm.com, Mike15 promo code. NuCalm.com, promo code Mike15 for an extra 15% off. Go today.
Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience podcast. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. Mike is passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
David Brown, thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. I'm super excited for our time together. It's not every day that I get to spend time with a war hero. So I'm really, really excited about this. So thank you again for being here. Like we talked about before we hit record, everybody has a story and our passion is to help them tell it. So with your permission, we're going to start with where you were born, go up to today. And then we want to talk about the books that you've written, specifically one called Hard Rain, right? About your service and about time in the war, that kind of thing. Thanks again for being here.
No, it's my pleasure, and thank you for inviting me.
Appreciate you, bud. So where were you born?
I started life in Cambridge in England, which is what we call Fen country, in East Anglia, and pretty poor background, really. We were so poor I had to wear hand-me-downs, and sadly I only had an older sister, so it's quite embarrassing.
Yeah.
And it was a poor area in Cambridge known as the Kite, which I'm glad they've really pulled it down now and built some decent housing.
Yeah.
But I left Cambridge when I was 15. I left school, pretty poor education, really. And I did what I'd always wanted to do, which was join the army at 15.
Wow.
Which we could in those days.
So they allowed you to do that at 15. Wow.
Yeah, you didn't go into active service or anything like that at 15. You went to a training unit.
Gotcha.
Where you had 2 years of really good education and learning all the military skills that you needed for the future in the army. And the idea of it was they were training what they call junior leaders.
Yeah.
That's, NCOs and warrant officers for the army.
That's awesome.
And I never really looked back. I spent a full career. I did work my way up through the ranks and finally got a commission as an officer, and I served till I was 55.
Wow. That's a
40
long time.
years.
That's 40 years.
Yeah, yep.
That's a long time. Wow. So growing up in Cambridge, what was your favorite thing about growing up there?
To be quite honest, I don't think I had a favorite thing, except the one thing I always remembered as a very young boy being taken to school after lunch by my father, who was a motor mechanic, on his bicycle, and stopping at a little shop on the way to school in the summer
Yeah.
and getting a 1 penny ice lolly.
Oh,
And and I sucked on that thing all the way to school, and I think it's one of my favorite memories. But to be quite honest, my parents separated when I was about 7, and we were here, there, and everywhere. And
sorry.
then I had a stepfather who I have to say was a good man, very kind.
Yeah.
Um, but I couldn't wait to leave home and join the army.
Yeah. So you left and joined the army. Did you have a favorite subject in those 2 years that you were training? Was there a
Mhm.
favorite subject that you had?
Well, I was in the infantry, and I guess two things I enjoyed the most. One was the education they gave me, which was far superior to the one I'd had at school.
That's cool.
And the second thing I think was when I was on the Rangers firing rifles and submachine guns and machine guns and things like that. That gave me a real kick.
Yeah. I bet it did. I bet it did. So growing up, who was the most influential person to you?
Wow. Well, you could say the most influential person in the beginning
Mhm.
was my platoon sergeant.
Yeah.
Um, you know, uh, he was full of various wisdoms
Mhm.
and sayings like, when going got tough, he'd just say, "It's only mind over matter, lad. I
Yeah.
don't mind, and you don't matter."
Oh,
And
wow.
and
That's a
that
little bit of
always
a turn
stuck.
on that phrase.
Yeah, that always stuck with me. And another um, uh, thing really was, I think, in later life, my late wife Carol was a huge influence on me,
Yeah.
and turned me from something of a bit of a wild animal to a human being, I think.
She
Which,
domesticated you, did she?
yeah, I kind of, yeah, not completely, but she did. She liked to join in my adventures as well, so
Oh,
that was a pretty good thing.
oh, that's cool. So in the 40 years, I mean, this is impressive, but in the 40 years that you were in the military, what was the single most important thing you learned?
The most important thing, I think, was that life is very precious,
Yeah.
um, and it's easy to throw it away.
Yeah.
Fortunately, in the small conflicts that I served in the Middle East and later at home in Northern Ireland, um, I had good bosses
Yeah.
who, unlike the old days, weren't into throwing good men away. Only having a very small army in Britain, we couldn't afford to anyway.
Yeah.
And they spent a lot of time training people to a high standard, and you couldn't afford to waste them.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of care taken, I think, by certainly our immediate officers.
So at some point in your career, Queen Elizabeth II awarded you with service medals. Can you talk about what that experience was like? I mean, she was an amazing woman. She was an amazing monarch.
Yeah, she was, and the amazing thing about her was when you met her, she completely put you at ease.
Yeah.
You had butterflies in your tummy. You were kind of a bit wound up inside, and the minute she greeted you with a smile and put her
Yeah.
hand out, you just felt completely at ease.
Yeah.
And she was an amazing person. And yet, in fact, when the second medal I got, which was presented by her, she'd met 292 people that day, of which I was about 278.
Wow.
And she stood there all that time, and she wasn't a young woman then. And a smile on her face, talked to you, just really an exceptional person. And I think if anybody in England wasn't a monarchist or anything like that in favor of royalty, I think if they met her or her sister, who Princess Margaret, who I met as well, I think they would have changed their mind completely.
Was it amazing to you how dedicated she was to what she did? I mean, it's one thing to think of a queen, right? And again, I was raised in America, right? We don't have royalty here, so to speak, right? I watched though over many decades, right, of my life that she's been the monarch there. And it never ceased to amaze me. Whenever she was called upon, she rose to the occasion. She was always where she needed to be. Like she never really ever called in sick or you know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah,
she just bucked up and made it happen. I mean, it's
yeah.
that work ethic, that dedication that she had to the English people, I think is just absolutely legendary. Can you talk about that for a second and how it made you feel?
Yes, I understand where you're coming from. When her father died and she had to obviously become queen, she made a speech, televised speech, which was unusual in those days, saying that she would dedicate her life to service of the country. And she certainly did that in
Yeah.
every way. And as you say, she just rose to every occasion. I mean, the number of countries she toured and met people and gave them, in some places, I think a lot of the places, particularly the poorer nations, she gave them hope,
Yeah.
something to cling to. And that's what she gave us here, something to cling to, something that was steadfast and would never let us down. And I think King Charles III is very much of that ilk.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy's suffering from cancer, going through all the treatment, yet he turns out day after day and meets all these commitments for people. And I don't think many people understand the sacrifice he's making,
Yeah.
especially at his age,
Yeah.
which
It's
is
certainly
in his 70s.
it's amazing the dedication that family has. You know, they just show up and you know, it's one thing for somebody to say something, right? It's something entirely different for them to live it and to be as dedicated to the people as they are. I mean, it just they just impress me. I just think the world of them. So so as in your time of service, which is obviously 4 decades, right? In your time of service, was there a time when you stopped and you thought, I'm not sure I want to be doing this?
Well, there were one or two times when I thought, am I doing the right thing?
Yeah.
And I got to a point round about the mid 70s when I thought I was getting pulled into things that perhaps I didn't want to be in.
Yeah.
And I thought, time for a change.
Yeah.
And I'd been in the infantry then for over 15 years. And I did a job for my commanding officer. And I said to him, if I do this job well, will you sanction me transferring to what was then known as the Army Physical Training Corps, whose job is to get the Army fit to fight.
Yeah.
Pretty tough outfit to get into, pretty high physical and mental standards. And I was a bit long in the tooth at 30 to do it, whereas most of the guys going in were in their 20s, or 20, 21 at the most. And he said yes. So I applied, got through, there was 55 of us on the 3-month selection course, and 5 of us got through. So 50 were kind of semi-rejected.
Wow.
And had to go back to their units, but they still had a role to play. And then the 5 of us had to do another almost 9 months of training and selection, and every so often we were tested, and if we were found wanting, we were given the shove. So yeah, that's what I did. And then I got a commission in that corps. So I was able to do a lot of the things that I loved, which was mountaineering, parachuting, canoeing. Well, not so much the parachuting. I'd never seen the sense of jumping out of a perfectly good plane. But
even if you're ordered to, right? Like,
yeah,
what
that was it. Well, the reason I really got into it was because I took over a unit in the Far East, which did all these different activities, training troops in sub-aqua, parachuting, canoeing, rock climbing, mountaineering, all these things. But I hadn't really done any parachuting at the time. So I thought, I can't be in charge of a unit where there's something I haven't done.
Right.
So that's where I started. But I think my greater love of the two was not the parachuting, but paragliding.
Yeah.
I don't know whether you've done that or seen that, but
I've seen it, but I haven't done it.
that is such a thrill. You're up there with the eagles, you're soaring around, you can pick up the thermals. You know, you can decide when you want to come down, as opposed to with parachuting where you haven't got any choice.
You're going one direction. That's it, right?
That's it. Yeah, you're going down.
Yeah, there's no controlling that deal.
No.
So in your service, what's the number one thing that you think kept you in for 4 decades?
Wow. The love of it, really.
Yeah.
I just loved being in the army. I enjoyed the comradeship, the fellowship, being with people who understood what you were about.
Yeah.
But also having the ability to mix with people outside of it who didn't know what you were about, but still accepted you, even though you might to them appear a bit odd.
That's cool. So at some point you make a decision to write your first book. There are people that are listening to this podcast episode that are thinking about writing their first book. They're thinking about all kinds of things, right? Starting certain things, right? Can you talk for a second about the mindset and the thought process that went into deciding to write your first book?
Well, I didn't start writing my first book, which was The Walls of the Rad Fan. I started 6 years ago.
Okay.
And it was kind of, my wife at the time was very, very ill, and we had to spend a lot of time at home. And she started writing short stories about a friend's dog to kill time. And I thought, what a good idea. I've never told anybody about my military service,
right,
for various reasons. And I thought, maybe this is a way to unload a factual book, but written in a fiction way. And that kind of got me in it. So I was killing time trying to stay with my wife while she was resting and whatever. And someone then said to me, "Oh, you should try and get that published." And I sent it off, and it was accepted straight away, which surprised me completely. I didn't know what to do. It wasn't my greatest book, but I learned a lot from it, and Hard Rain was my next book, which was I think 1,000 times better than the first one. Although someone else starting to write now, I would say to them, don't just do it on a whim. Don't think about something, oh, is that going to be exciting? Will people like, write about what you know, and write from your heart, and let it flow. Don't worry at the time when you think it's commercial or not. Just let it flow, and then you can mess around with the grammar, the story, once you've got it all down on paper. And
did you know there's an app that has no side effects that allows you to use sound waves to tell your brain what you want it to do. It's called NuCalm.com, and it's amazing. It literally uses sound waves. If you want to tell your brain to go to sleep, if you want to tell your brain to recover, if you want to tell your brain to put you in peak physical state, if you want to tell your brain to focus, if you want to tell your brain to take a power nap, you can do all of these things and more with NuCalm.com. Go to NuCalm.com today, promo code Mike15. NuCalm.com, promo code Mike15 for an extra 15% off.
Work on it like that. That's a much better way than trying to manufacture a story.
That's phenomenal advice. And I really, really, really appreciate you sharing that. I do have a question, though. I'm in the process of writing my first book, and there's and again, I'm just asking, is there a point, because of what you just said, is there a point where people back up from doing this because they're sort of concerned about putting themselves out there and being judged?
Yeah, I think we all have that fear. I mean, I wrote my books, my 3 books so far, in a fictional form, mostly because I'd signed the Official Secrets Act, and
Right.
I couldn't say things are fact.
Yeah.
And I think you do have that fear at the back of your mind, but that mustn't stop you.
Yeah.
You think if that's your story and how it flows, let it flow. And obviously you've got to perhaps do some editing around after you've got the story down. You know, if you find one bit that you don't think's grabbing people's attention, it goes on too long, edit it a bit.
Yeah.
You know, and just play with it, but don't let it stop you. You know, don't let it stop.
Awesome. Thank you. In your opinion, are there more people that love what you do than there are people that are potentially criticizing you?
I hope so. The
Great
funny
answer.
the funny thing about Hard Rain, which is based on my experiences in the beginning of the terrorist war in Northern Ireland, was I found that a lot of people who read it were ladies who I never thought would read that sort of book, and they loved it completely. But the one question they kept coming up with in the book, where there's a female called Jenny who was kidnapped, and the central character gets her out and gets her home, and they all asked, did that lady become my first wife? Which was not so, but could it be the central character, Bulmer Brown's wife? We don't know yet.
Oh, interesting.
We need to wait for another book.
Oh, so we're going to find out in the next book.
Well, the next book, The Darkness, carries on from Northern Ireland, and you don't find out in that. But the 4th book, featuring Bulmer Brown, which I'm about halfway through at the moment, and I hope it's going to be the last one about Bulmer Brown. It may well happen in that.
Interesting. So we've got something to look forward to.
Yeah, well, there could be wedding bells. And then again, they may not be.
You never know, man.
You never know.
One of those things, right? You never know.
That's exactly right.
So let me ask you this. You started a new life after your wife passed. Can you talk about how you did that and what sort of the key lessons were that you learned?
Yeah, I think my wife and I often talked about if I died first or she died first, what we would do. And we both agreed that whoever was left, we wanted them to be happy.
Yeah.
And I think for 6 months or more after my wife died, I was in probably the deepest pit of despair that I'd ever known. I'd never known pain like it. And I don't think there was a day went by without me crying. But I suddenly realized that you can't live your life like that. And it wasn't what she wanted. And fortunately, at the time, I was going to a church now in the town where I live, which was an English-speaking Church of England church. And it really helped me renew my faith. And I think I never really lost my faith, but like many people, it kind of a lot of the time went on the back burner.
Yeah.
And you only called on it when you were in trouble.
Yeah.
And I was in big trouble, mentally and physically. I was blowing it. And then I was lucky enough at my church to meet a lovely lady called Linda, who had lost her husband to cancer a year before I lost Carol. And we kind of hit it off and spent a lot of time together, and we knew what each other was going through. So that was a good thing. And just last year, we went and got married.
Congratulations, man.
Thank you.
I'm happy.
So now I have a new lady in my life, and I'm out of the pit of despair and getting on with things. I'm even playing golf better than I ever did.
Wow. Good job.
I never played it well before.
Yeah, I haven't either. I have a golf game that's like a circus act. One of these days we'll have to play together, because you'll feel like Tiger Woods after we're done. Right? You might get some false sense of security, you know?
Yeah. It may be the other way around.
Okay. So at some point, it sounds like, and again, I heard this through a little birdie told me this, but it sounds like you actually secretly admired your enemy. Can you talk about that for a second?
Yeah, not so much the enemy. I had respect for the enemy, because if you don't have respect for what they can do, how they do it, and their tenacity, then you're not going to.
You'll underestimate them, right?
Yeah,
and that can be life-threatening. Yeah.
But what I had a lot of respect for was both the Catholic and the Protestant communities in Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
I mean, the IRA, the Irish Republican Army, so-called, and their offshoots of the provisional IRA, they didn't really care who they killed.
Yeah.
I mean, if you were a Catholic family, and this happened a lot in the state, and you stood up against them, you know, there'll be a dark night, armed men would come to your door and just take your wife or you off to some dark wood and kill you. Or if you were lucky, they would just shoot you through the knees, and what they term kneecapping. If you were unlucky, they'd hold you down and use electric drill on your knees. And out of all, I mean, they killed a lot of people, but close to 400 people were from their own community, the Catholic community. And they did this in the way I've described, or by blowing up a shopping center which had everybody in it. So, I mean, in terms of some wars, the numbers killed was relatively low, you know, sort of 4,000. But when you suddenly say, yeah, but 47,500 people were seriously injured, it starts to put things in perspective. And, you know, of all those people killed, the security forces were only responsible for about 600, roughly split between half of the Protestant community and Catholic community. And they would have been people that were either rioting, were trying to kill people, or so forth. So it was a pretty bloody war, especially when I started there at the beginning of the Troubles in '69, right through till the end of '76. So, you know, it was an unpleasant thing. And I think hard rain brings that out to show what the security forces had to do and how they did it. And touching into the darker side of operations as well. perhaps that other people won't talk about.
So what's it like to confront an enemy in hand-to-hand combat?
It's pretty scary. I mean, you can take it from one extreme where you might be standing with 6 other guys and told to stop people coming out through a road junction,
Mm-hmm.
and you're confronted with 400 or 500 people, mostly young men. First of all, throwing rocks, then petrol bombs, then what we called nail bombs, which was plastic explosive with 6-inch nails strapped around it,
Mm-hmm.
and to a gunman stepping out from behind a crowd and opening fire on you.
Mm-hmm.
For half a dozen men to stand there and hold a junction against that sort of numbers, without being allowed to use lethal force
Mm-hmm.
until real threats like people being shot at or bombed, takes a lot of guts and a lot of discipline from the soldiers concerned. It'd be very easy for any soldier just to start shooting. But apart from odd occasions where things got out of hand, that never happened.
So
But if you take, sorry,
go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
And then if you want to take it down to face to face with a gunman,
Mm-hmm.
then it's down to training, determination, and the will to win.
Yeah.
And my central character, Bomber, in both books, is faced with that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's got to be life-changing. So in your book, Hard Rain, what are the top 3 takeaways that a reader can look forward to when they read it?
Wow, that's a tough one. I think, firstly, it might give people who don't really know much about Northern Ireland during that period. And remember, this war went on for 30 years.
Yeah.
It started long before that, but
Yeah.
in the terms we're talking about, for 30 years.
Those are deep-seated resentments from a very, very long time ago.
I could bore you silly with taking you back to the Battle of the Boyne and King Billy, and the start of the Orange Order, but it really started in the 1920s, about 22, when England, they had a referendum about 1920 to see what the people of Ireland wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, 6 counties in the north, which were more Protestants than Catholic, they wanted to stay part of the United Kingdom, and the rest didn't. So that's what happened. Ulster, as it was called, remained part of the United Kingdom,
Mm-hmm.
and the rest became Ireland as we know it.
Yeah.
The IRA didn't like this.
Yeah.
And they actually were started a civil war in Southern Ireland, fighting their own people to try and enforce their will, which fortunately was defeated to a point. And a lot of people forget that during World War II, the IRA sided with Nazi Germany and started a bombing campaign in England. Fortunately, that was defeated as well. But in the 50s and 60s, they started a cross-border campaign, killing officials, policemen, anybody that they thought didn't agree with them. And then in 69, the civil unrest started, where law and order broke down, and that was when the army was called in. And at that period, there was about 6 weeks of real peace, where the Catholic community looked at the army as their saviors. Protestant community looked at the army as their saviors. So you were in the middle. I mean, I'm standing on what we call the green lines and being brought tea from one side of the community, bacon sandwiches from the other side of the community, and things like this.
Wow.
And that was a period when the politicians could have stepped in and made a difference. But I can't blame the politicians too much, although I do blame them for most things. The 300 years of bigotry is very hard to stamp out in 6 weeks.
Yeah, it really is.
And come to terms with. It took another 30 years to do it. So yeah, you've got to understand. It's hard to understand the Irish history and problems. And as I say, it could go back a further 300 years from
Yeah,
1969 to William of Orange and the Battle of the Boyne.
that was a long time ago.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
what would be the top 3 takeaways?
yeah. So really, the understanding of the situation in Northern Ireland
Yeah,
and the political and history of the place. The second, the horror
yeah,
and terror that a war of this nature, particularly an urban war, can produce.
yeah,
And thirdly, an understanding of how the security forces cope with that sort of thing.
right.
You know, that's the tricky bit.
So Hard Rain is your second or your third book?
Hard Rain is my second, and The Darkness is the third book.
Is Darkness just come out?
Darkness came out last year,
Okay.
or actually the end of 23. So I always call it last year.
Okay.
And Hard Rain came out the year before.
Right.
The fourth book is in progress.
So when the fourth book is finished, will you come back on and talk about it?
I'd love to. I'd love to, Mike. And it would give me great pleasure to do so.
So real quick, let's talk about The Darkness. So
Okay.
Hard Rain, we're pretty familiar with what that is. Talk about The Darkness. It continues this story, right?
It continues the story, and the central character, Bulmer Brown, gets sucked into the dark side of these operations more and more. A lot of it is against his will, but he's his own worst enemy.
Mhm.
He likes a challenge. He's stubborn, but he's also a bit of a rebel, a maverick, if you like,
Mhm.
in some terms too. And he likes to do things his way. So that carries on into that, and then with him going to Gibraltar and being stationed in Gibraltar, and then being pulled back to Northern Ireland, and eventually Switzerland.
Mhm.
Um, so it kind of carries on that theme, and there's a little bit in it with the lady from Hard Rain, Jenny, where he's on leave in his hometown, Cambridge, and he actually bumps into her because she's changed from Queen's College in Belfast to Cambridge University, where she'll be safer from being kidnapped. So that's kind of, there's a little bit of that in there, but not too much. I don't go into any of this sordid stuff in my books.
No, I'm with you. I'm with you. So, but we're gonna find out about the love interest part in the fourth book, right?
Yeah, he's a sad case, is Bomber. He just doesn't take his chances when he should.
So we're gonna find out if he's lucky in love or not so much.
Yeah, I think he's unlucky in love in his early years. He might be luckier in his later years.
Yeah. Well, it'll probably be the grace of a good woman, right?
Yeah,
Right?
yeah,
Because
exactly
sometimes
that.
we can't help ourselves.
No. One thing I would encourage any of your listeners, if they get the book, is to read Bomber's Lament, which is
Yeah.
on the back cover, because I think it gives a good insight how Bomber and perhaps other security force people at the time felt there.
Yeah.
It's something I was rather proud that I wrote.
Yeah. Sounds like it. So where can people get the books?
Well, your side of the pond, it's available on Amazon,
Okay.
so it can be got from there. And I'm hoping any good bookstore in America might have it as well.
Yeah, that'd be great. So we're actually, as of a couple of days ago, we're heard in 60 countries. We just picked up Egypt the other night.
Wow.
So we're literally in 60 countries worldwide. So if people are in England and they want to pick up the book and they're listening, by the way, England's one of our top. Shout out to England, right? They're one of our top listeners in terms of countries. Bangladesh, by the way, is number 2, which is
Oh.
wild, right?
Yeah.
I mean, really wild. Belgium is big. We're big in Belgium. We're big in Germany. So
Yeah.
if people are in Europe, where can they get the books?
Well, Any of the Amazon outlets in those countries
Okay.
will supply it.
Okay.
There shouldn't be any problem there. And if there is, they can always write to Austin Macaulay, the publishers, direct.
Okay.
They can Google them,
Okay.
and you could order them direct through them.
Awesome. Is there anything else you'd like to cover before we wrap up?
No, except I'm very impressed with the worldwide spread that you've achieved with your program. And
We've been doing this 18 months and 3 days.
really,
Yeah.
wow.
And you're
Wow.
episode 305. So
That's 305. I'll
yeah,
make a note of
305. Well, thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. This has been a lot of fun.
Mike, I've really enjoyed talking to you. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, sir. Can I ask you a question? Did you know that there's a technology that uses sound waves that'll tell your brain what to do? There literally is. It's called NuCalm.com. It can tell your brain to heal, tell your brain to sleep, tell your brain to do all kinds of things. It can get you fired up. It can be a pre-workout. NuCalm.com. And the promo code is Mike15. NuCalm.com, promo code Mike15 for an extra 15% off. Go today.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at the Mike Litton Experience.